Hey, it's Ron Toy with the Ron Toy team at Cross Country Mortgage, coming to you live today to do a market update on what's going on, where we at in the market, what are rates doing, and go from there. And also to go over because HFHA and K Schiller did their home price appreciation report this week, and it just came out, and home prices are up. We're on track for 5.4% year over year, and month over month we're up 2%. So this is huge. Again, this is why it's so important to talk with and get with local licensed residential mortgage loan officers to help guide you on this path, because there's a lot of misinformation that's being spread online about home prices potentially dropping and all this other stuff. And I share it on every one of my lives that statistically, since 1942, we've only seen that happen 6 times. And 5 of them were between 2007 and 11, and one time in 1991 for 1%. And that, since 1942, we've seen recessions, depressions, wars, gas shortages, everything. So it's important to know this stuff. But when K Schiller comes out and shows the report and showing that home prices are appreciating still on year over year at 5.5%, and as rates come down, because what's going to happen when the Fed cuts the Fed fund rate on the 18th, depending on how much they cut, it's going to cause rates to come down, especially as we are seeing inflation coming down. But there's other reports that are come out prior to the 18th Fed fund rate decision, like PCE that comes out on the 30th. That's going to be a big indicator on what's going to happen for the Fed fund rate cut. Also is the Fed's favorite measure of inflation. So if PCE comes in a way that shows inflation's continuing to come down, like every other report's showing, we're going to see them make those adjustments. But you have to know what's going to happen, and you can go and get all this data yourself. That's why I like to talk about this on live. Thank you, everyone who's joining. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. I'm a licensed residential mortgage loan officer. I've been doing this about 10 years, helped 2,000 families with their home investment journey, answering questions, educating to help clients, realtors, loan officers be empowered to make a buying decision or to make phone calls to their clients to keep in touch. So right now we're going over the markets. We're flat for the day. Let me see. I'm going to pull that up. Usually I put it up on the screen, but I didn't screenshot stuff today because tomorrow is a lunch and learn that I'm hosting at Capital Title. But we're right now the bond market, which I talk about every day on all of my lives. We're at 100.95 on the 30-year UMBS 5.5% coupon. That's the coupon that everybody's trading off of right now. And so when you're comparing rates, you want to ask that question. Hey, what is the bond market price that this rate is attached to, and what coupon is it on? So that when you call, because if you call at 9 o'clock in the morning and you call another loan officer at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, 1 o'clock, the rates might be a little different. And that's why you want to ask the question, what bond market price is this rate attached to and what coupon? So when you call, Kat Loans on here and you ask her a rate, or you call Nate and you ask them for a rate, or Carlos and you ask him for a rate, you know what you're shopping. Now, sometimes things are a little bit different if somebody's a broker, but I'm trying to educate to the most common denominator, and that is the 5.5 UMBS coupon. So we have that. Plus, I talked about K Schiller's report that came out and on home price appreciation data. It was great. Home prices are still on track to for 5.5% appreciation this year. And there's a lot of people online that have been sharing information that's like, oh, home prices are going to crash, the market's going to crash, the home loans can't do that. None of that is factual at all. And that's why I like to come on here to help educate and show data so that people are aware. Let me pull that up on the background so you can see it. 42. And yes, I cover this on every one of my lives because it's important information, because sometimes new people join and they might not have ever seen it put down in one place. And you can go and verify the information so you can see it. But this is what I do. And I study the markets. Every loan officer has their own thing, right? And mine, I study the markets like a hawk, and it's something I track. Now, nobody's got a crystal ball knowing everything, but if you look at history, you can kind of project what's going to happen. And so here's home price appreciation data since 1942. Let me get out the way. Screenshot that. Now, as you can see in this, it's going to show you the times where the market went down or stayed flat. 2007 through 2011 was an anomaly because during that time period, we overbuilt based on demand. The lending guidelines were if you could fog a mirror, you could get a loan. So if you had a pulse, and there were things like stated income loans where you could say you made 500 grand, but maybe you made 50 grand, and they would give you 4, 5, 6 houses, and you're over leveraged. And then the little extra little was balloon mortgages, where 3-year, whatever, 5-year balloon, where you're in your home and they're like, oh, don't worry about it. But you can refinance by the time this balloon comes due, because back then the whole loan became due, or you had to pay this crazy amount. Well, most people couldn't refinance because they were over leveraged. They didn't put enough down, and then their home values went down because, again, they overbuilt. We won't be in that position ever again, because we have regulations in place that protect consumers, because we had to bail out greedy banks to Too Big to Fail. There's so many good movies you need to go watch. The Big Short, Margin Call, Too Big to Fail. These will show you a behind the scenes look, because back then I was in the trash business, but I also had my own company doing property preservation for banks. So I was the person going in after somebody was getting foreclosed on, cleaning out the property, making sure it was ready to go for when they had to list the property. So I got to see the industry from a different perspective than most loan officers, because I was the guy that was in the house cleaning it out, evicting people. And it was sad. I didn't know about mortgages back then. I was a young kid. I mean, that was 2007. Jesus, think about how long ago 2007 and 8 was now. But seeing it from that perspective and knowing that things could have been done and put in place to help, especially if anybody would have tracked any level of data, it'd be a different story. Let me show you what I mean by tracking the data. Everybody and their mom should have known what was happening, because I wish this was a little bit smaller, but you'll get it. All right, here we go. Nope. Is this better? Can you see this right here? Wish I had an option where it was a little bit, okay, here we go. So what you see at the top is the generations, right? I'll move out the way so you can screenshot it. Between, as you can see, in 1973, there was a huge drop in population or birthing rates, because stuff happens. People get more information or whatever, but birthing rates declined. And it did decline for that entirety of the generation compared to baby boomers and millennials. But you see that huge drop in birthings, but then less people were born. Look at 2006, the most homes ever built in history, versus the blue, which is housing formations. This is to be educational. So if you're a realtor, loan officer, you're like, man, I watched a live, call your clients. I watched a live today and this guy shared some information and I verified it, because you can go to bls.gov, Case-Shiller, and pull this data yourself. He showed me some information that was really staggering, because this is why the prices went down. Look at 2006 through 2011 for completions versus formations. The yellow is completions, meaning homes being built, and the blue is formations. Completions outpace formations drastically for that time period where home prices went down. But then you start to see that the tides turn. 2013, 2014, it starts to catch up. But then as we get into 2015 and then beyond, housing formations outpaced completions. And we are still in that situation right now. We have way more people are in the market to buy compared to back then. And then let me show you this other little tidbit. It's important. Oh, let me see. Background. Is this smaller? Shit. Oh well, it's close enough. But you can see back in 2007, there were 4 million homes available for 11 million less buyers than that are in the market now. Right now, at the end of 2023, there's about 1 million homes available, a little over 1 million. Same thing right now. There's about 1.3 million homes available for 11 million more buyers. Supply and demand is real. It's a thing. And when you have that many homes being built back then and lax lending guidelines, there was false demand, and it led to an absolute crap show. But this is important, because people have delayed buying a house because they thought the media was telling them, hey, the home prices might crash, there might be a market crash. Jumping over dollars to pick up nickels, because they're like, well, I'm going to wait until the rates drop. And I get it, because look at this. This is on a $400,000, just the principal and interest payment. Now this is for educational, so you can see. So on a $400,000, if your rate was 7% versus 6.5% and a 6, obviously if it goes to 6, it saves you $263 a month. That's a good amount of savings. But let's just round it to $300 for easy math. That's $3,600 for the year, right? If you saved it for that 1 year, trying to wait. But on that $400,000 purchase price, we just saw that appreciation is on track for 5.5%. So let's just call it 5%. 5% of 400,000, and now that's off the loan amount. Let's say, but I'm going to do it for easy math. That's the actual value of the property. 5% of 400,000 is $20,000. Would you rather have made 20 grand through appreciation or save 3,600? Now, obviously, if you can't afford the payment, that's a different story, but you need to buy what you can comfortably afford. Don't overstretch your budget, especially if it's your first house, because you don't know what you don't know. You want to get in, be comfortable. Again, buy what you can comfortably afford. But that's a way that people have been missing out, and they're wondering why they're falling farther and farther behind. It's that. Hey, thank everybody who's joining. If you have questions, put it in the comments. I'm here to help answer questions, but I'm a licensed residential mortgage loan officer, helping people get educated about what's going on in the market, dispelling some information I've seen online, and helping people be empowered to make a buying decision, whether you use me or not. Also, there's great loan officers. I talk about this on every one of my lives that you should go check out and follow as well. Cat Loans, Carlos Munoz, they're great. Go follow them. If I forgot some, my ADHD will probably remind me mid conversation. So this is important. So it has become more affordable, but every 1 point drop in rate brings about 2 to 3 million buyers back to the market, raising prices 2 to 5%. So this is where we're going to see this as we continue throughout the remainder of the year, which if you go back to my earlier videos at the beginning of the year, I was telling people from then, hey, watch this time period in the year because it happens every election cycle. And also because I study the markets and I know the reports that are getting updated with PCE, PPI, CPI, and I see the data that's going to be replaced from the year before. And I know that as inflation comes down, the Fed is going to have to change their policy of monetary tightening, and that's going to loosen up, causing rates to drop. And that's what we're seeing. It's just nice to be able to point back to stuff and say, hey, see, remember what I was telling you back in, December, January, February, March, April, all the months up until this date, it's actually happening and it's exciting. But also, as the rates come down, you're going to see a lot of people trying to push out data for refinancing, which sometimes refinancing makes sense because as you can see, hey, I want to save $263 a month. But there's other questions you got to find out, like what if rates drop further? Should you wait? Should have a lock strategy and have that conversation with your loan officer. First, start with the loan officer that helped you get in your home before calling a random one off of a sign or a mailer or a flyer, because those people are buying data from counties, the credit bureaus, just not building relationships and fishing, throwing out a wide net and just hoping that people reach back out to them. And I find that shady. But I'm here to help. I want to answer questions. But this is what's going on. Rates are coming down. We're, in the low sixes. And the thing is, like with sellers, they can do temporary buy downs and seller funded and help you get your rate lower. Permanent buy downs. There's opportunities and deals to be had in this market that we won't see in other markets, especially as rates continue to come down. That's why you need to jump on opportunities now. And I'm talking from lived experience. I bought my house. I've bought and sold multiple properties over the last 5 years, but I specifically bought one in July of last year in 2023 when the rates were at their highest, because there was my house appraised for $50,000 over list. Hey, how's it going? My house appraised $50,000 over list, and the sellers gave us like $23,000 or $26,000 to help cover some closing costs. So I ended up netting positive almost $70,000 just at the start of that transaction because the sellers gave it to me plus the appraisal. Want to get a condo, but I don't know where to start or if my credit is good enough. That's a great question. And the best place to start is with a loan officer. You can feel free, if you go on my profile, there's a link to my website where you can schedule a consultation. I'd love to talk with you and walk you through the process, because credit is usually something that if it's not where it needs to be right now, I can put together a game plan to help you get there. But most loan officers can too. We have top score programs, and I have to find one in Chicago. Yeah, I'd love to help you and make sure you're connected and on the right path and know what to look out for and go from there. But buying a condo is so important. A lot of people forget that if they're living in a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment, buy a 1 or 2 bedroom condo, and at least you're building equity, and you build equity 2 ways. First one, forced savings through principal balance reduction, because every time you make your payment, a portion of that goes to your principal balance reduction. So you're growing equity. The other is through appreciation, which I showed the appreciation data for since 1942. It's pretty stable. But that's the thing. You're in your home, typically your first home 3 to 6 years. So you have that time to experience a good market trend. But like if you look at the data with investing in a stock, right? A stock, say you have $10,000 and you buy 10,000 shares that go up by 10%. And so now in that year, you made $1,000. So your cash on cash return is 10%. It was great. I made 10%. We want 10% return, right? I want to put my money like index funds over the last 30 years. It's been 10 plus percent rate of return on average. But in a home, when you buy a property, say you use $10,000 to get into a home. Well, if that home goes up 10%, then that means on this $400,000 deal, it made $40,000 that year. So you had 400% return on your investment. So your cash on cash return is 400%. Who would not want to do that? And that's also why we're seeing a lot of investments, private equity corporations buying up as much inventory as they can, because the cash on cash return is insane. Yeah, they have to put 20% or more down on a $400,000 house or on any property. But if they had to put 80 in and the property goes up 10%, they made 40 grand. So they made 50% rate of return. Like that's better than the 10% in the index funds. So why wouldn't they want to put as much money? I don't think they have any business being in residential space. I think hedge funds and private equity, they should stick to commercial and multifamily. You want to do that? Good. Invest in all of those things. But residential real estate, 1 to 4 unit, needs to be for regular consumers and small investors, regular people, not people trying to hoard the wealth and control and manipulate people. And so that's what I really want to see. And for you, don't worry. I know it can be stressful, but don't feel bad about feeling that stress and pressure. Buying a home is in the top 5 most stressful things a person does. They do it maybe 2 to 3 times their whole life. And so I want to validate your concerns and fears. It is scary, but it doesn't have to be when you've built a relationship with someone that you know, like, and trust. That's why it's good to interview your loan officer before going too far down the road. Find out, how many homes have you bought and sold over the last few years? What's a good story, and what's one of your files that went sideways? What drives you? What makes you be in this business? Find out their why so that you can see if it aligns with your current and long-term financial goals. Find out if they're well networked. Do you have a network where I can call you once we close, where I can find out about plumbers, contractors, roofers, AC techs? Because that's the other part about being secure in your home ownership, is knowing you have someone to call that it cares about you. And that's the other part I'd encourage. But buy the 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, whatever bedroom condos and build your equity. But also what's really cool is once you stay in it for 12 months and say it's well under your budget, you can turn that into a rental property, get a 1-year lease agreement. So then it offsets the hit to your debt to income ratio. Go buy another property with minimum amount down, because you don't have to put 20% down when you're buying a primary residence. And then now you have 2 properties, and now you can build your real estate portfolio with a long-term mindset without ever having to put 20% down. And most states have down payment and closing cost assistance programs, and most of them are not necessarily required to be a first-time home buyer. A lot of misconceptions is that those programs are only for first-time home buyers. Like here in Texas, TSHAC, Seth, TDHCA, all of them have options for people who are not first-time home buyers. So you can get up to 5% assistance with them. And I can do it. Most loan officers can. It's nothing like I want to pretend like I'm special in that aspect. It's just that it's an option. And so love to talk with you, go into that more detail. But if you have questions, put them in the comments. I'm here to give updates on the market, showing how rates are, what it looks like when 1 point drop between 7 and 6, and why that's bringing more people back to the market. Freeing up $263 a month on a $400,000 purchase, when the average purchase price or the average property price right now in the United States is almost $500,000. It's a huge. And so that's why we want to go over this information, because I want to empower you to make a buying decision. And let me go ahead and take this off so I can get this off my background. But let me go over, maybe there's one other slide I considered. Let me see. I think I mentioned this on yesterday's live, but I'm going to go ahead and go on this. This is another update that was put out last night, and it's important because to see this is huge. 40% of homeowners currently do not have a mortgage. Their homes are paid for. This is amazing, but we haven't had that much in history, and there's the most amount of equity currently right now in properties that we've ever seen. And why that is something that needs to be paid attention to is the fact that once those people feel comfortable selling, because some of the people that own decided not to sell right now because they're like, well, I have a really low rate, or my home is almost paid for. But at the same time, we see $1 trillion in credit card debt. So many people are overspending, and they feel trapped in their low mortgage interest rate. And so as those rates come down, they're going to be able to sell their homes, but then they're going to be competing with all that cash, all that equity. And that's awesome for them. But for first-time homebuyers, if they don't have a good loan officer and realtor in their corner going to bat for them in the offers, it's going to be a challenge, like we saw in 2021 and 2022, when people were spending 70, 100,000 over list price just to get a house under contract, because they're also competing against private equity and investors who are offering all cash. And so there's some tactics that can be put into place to help make sure that you achieve your goals without having to overspend. But that's why you want to prepare, so you're proactively addressing these things versus reacting in the market. It's never too early to start the conversation with a good loan officer. I would start it as early as possible so that you can get a plan together and you understand the steps and processes. Also, interviewing realtors. There's great realtors out there that are amazing at negotiating, help you save a ton of money, help you on getting the sellers to cover title policies and surveys and different negotiation pieces that are important. This is where you want to interview the people who are going to be in your life. My realtor, Mo, she has helped me on 5 deals, 6 deals already. I refer my clients to her because we have a good, close personal relationship. And you want to have that relationship with a realtor. And because again, they're in it for life. I want to be your lender for life. Most lenders do, because we want to be there to make sure your goals are achieved. And did you guys know this, that 2/3 of the wealth that we have in our country is tied to the equity in homes? That's intense. And when you have wealth, there's power. That's why I'm on this app. I usually don't like social media. I'm not a big fan of this. I'm not great with technology, but I had a strong burning conviction after 2 years of like just watching and not doing any videos. I'm like, I have to be out here talking to people and sharing the information I have, because I have lived through it. I've invested, and I know the benefits and the returns, and I cannot keep this to myself. I have to share it. And I want to encourage people, whether you use me or not. I say that on every live. Don't feel pressure to use me. I'm here to educate and empower you to make a buying or refinancing decision. First, start with the loan officer if you own that helps you, if they did a good job. If they didn't, then it's on them. Shop around. But I always encourage people to go back to their original loan officer first to get the ball rolling. If you haven't worked with a loan officer, this is the perfect opportunity. Go on lives, follow some people, scope them out, see what they're about. Because again, when you're buying a house, I said it earlier, it's in the top 5 most stressful things. You're going to be in an emotional state. There's going to be times you're going to be frustrated or scared or nervous. You got to be able to trust the loan officer to have a conversation with you and you feel comfortable, because they're going to ask about your bank accounts, your pay stubs, your tax returns. And that can make us feel vulnerable. But that needs to be validated and understood, so that it's not like, oh man, I've been asking this borrower for 2 weeks now to send this in. Well, maybe you weren't asking the question right, or explaining it in a way that made the borrower feel comfortable giving you the information. Whenever I ask for certain documents from a client, I always make sure to follow it up with the reason why and what we're looking for, because I want to address that concern and help them feel comfortable and confident with what is being asked of them. It's a different approach, but doesn't mean I'm the best. It just means that that's how I do it. And again, it's why you want to interview. My lender gave me 6.5 and asked me to lock it. Should I lock it or float it? Well, the thing is, I would ask your loan officer these few questions. What is the bond market price that the rate is attached to, and what coupon? Because you want to know those numbers. And also ask the loan officer if he or she offers float down options if the rates recover more than 100 basis points. It's a lot, but just those are the things I would go back and ask the loan officer. And also look at when you're closing. So right now it just says NA for your name. So NA, when is your closing date? If you're still on the live, do you know your closing date, NA? 9/24. Oh yeah, you've got time. The 18th is the Fed fund rate decision. So I get why they're thinking about locking now. But I would ask those questions. I would literally ask right now, today, about a lock strategy. Be like, hey, what's your plan with PCE report coming out on the 30th? The jobs report on the 8th of September? The Fed fund rate decision on the 18th of September? Because that's plenty of time before your closing, potentially to have a rebound. Now, it's not a bad idea to lock in if the loan officer has a float down option. And so that's where I would ask the loan officer, again, what is the bond market price and coupon that this rate is attached to, the 6.5? And do you offer a float down option if the markets recover after, but before closing? And how soon do I need to request the float down? Because every company has a little bit different requirements to do what's called a float down. So locking it prevents your loan from going up. It doesn't mean your rate from going up. It doesn't mean your rate can't go down. The way it can go down is that process right there, is where you do a float down. Ask those questions up front so that you can take advantage of the market and make sure you get the best rates possible. And so if you want, shoot me a DM and I'll reply back to you with the exact wording to ask your loan officer in case you forgot. Or you can also screen record it and I can re-say what I just said, but whatever works best for you. But I'll recap it just in case you decide to screen share or screen record, whatever the wizard term is. Ask the loan officer, what is the bond market price and coupon that this rate is attached to? And then ask, do you have a float down option? If the market rebounds, what does that look like? And how close to closing do we need to request it? And if, like I said, if you screen recorded it, great. If not, shoot me a DM and I will send you that to ask them. Because I want to make sure that loan officer gets the best shot. Because I don't want you to feel like you have to shop someone else just in case the market recovers. And because as a loan officer, that's happened to me and the client didn't even think to ask. And it happens. And so that's where I proactively now I'm like, get ahead of that. Because whenever things like that happen, I always make sure to update my checklist and processes and procedures, because I never want a client to feel like they can't ask me that question. So to help the loan officer, if they didn't get ahead of that and have that conversation with you, that's what I want you to make sure is the questions to ask. And again, that's why I do this live, is to empower people to make a buying or refinance decision. Congratulations on your closing on 9/24. Awesome. You just made one of the best decisions of your life. And if you bought what you can comfortably afford, don't feel like you have to rush to try to pay your house off super fast, because statistically you're going to be in your house 3 to 6 years, maybe a little longer. Invest, get your house. If you pay your payment on a bi-weekly schedule, you can save a bunch of money on interest and go from there. But once you close, there's some awesome strategies that I can make sure to share with you too, to make sure that you double question your loan officer so that they stay on top of it as well. But if you're having a good relationship with him or her, don't leave. Everybody's going to be close on rate. That's the thing. Every loan officer out here is going to be close on rate. We're going to be close on our closing cost, because the only section that'll be different between every lender is Section A on the loan estimate. That's the origination charges. That's it, because everything else is third-party fees like title policies and insurance and tax prorations. All of that will be the same for every single lender. The only difference is going to be in Section A. Do they charge a flat fee to originate, or do they charge points to originate? That's going to be the biggest difference. So again, I want to tell people the real stuff, behind the scenes, behind the curtain type stuff, so that they're empowered. Those are the things I'd ask. Again, shoot me a DM. I'll answer it. Anybody else has questions, feel free to put it in the comments. I'm here to help. Ask me anything challenging or policy, or if you kind of ideas, I'll shoot it out to you. It doesn't have to be about mortgage. It is about mortgage on this market update. But I don't mind talking about more than that. Again, I bought and sold multiple properties over the last 5-7 years. No, it's almost 10 now. And so I have lived experience. That's important, especially right now. Because if somebody bought a house, like I've had clients that, oh, thank you so much for following me, man. That really means a lot. And I'm happy to answer your questions and make sure that you can bounce those off your loan officer and get the best rates and fees possible. But through my experience, buying and selling right now, because 5 years ago the market was different, 10 years ago the market was different. Before TRID, there's a whole different ball game. So I've had conversations with realtors and clients who are like, oh yeah, well my and I had an uncle who bought a house 10 years ago or 20 years ago, and they told me this. Well, it's like, well, your uncle buying 10 years ago was back when guidelines were, if you could fog a mirror, you could get a loan. So it's a little bit different now, and go from there and help. And then what I usually do, if somebody has an uncle or an aunt or a parent that's involved in the conversations, I always go back. Thank you so much. I always go back and ask if they would like them on the call. And because I want to include everybody that has input on the conversation, because I don't want anyone to feel left out. And sometimes having the family on there where they get on board, they can see it from a different perspective. Like one of my clients, their uncle was an investor and, not a loan officer, but understood investments. And so I was able to present some information that he hadn't heard before about different ways to leverage equity positions. And it was huge. And yes, looping family in is so important, especially as like somebody like a younger person who, their parents are still heavily involved in their life. I want to validate that and honor it, because that's an important relationship that builds trust. And so I always loop in whoever is involved in the decision or conversations and make sure that they feel comfortable and confident as well. Because again, this is scary. Buying a home, people do it 2 to 3 times their whole life. It's not like buying a car or applying for a credit card or going down and getting furniture. This is a huge financial decision. It's in the top 5 most stressful things a person does. Maybe do it 2 to 3 times. I like to validate that and make sure people feel good, because when we're in a stress situation like buying a home, especially if there's a couple involved, there could be fighting. And I tell them up front. I'd be like, hey guys, something to look out for that I've seen and noticed with some of my clients, because this is in the top 5 most stressful things, is the opportunity for things and opinions to kind of start rubbing together. And here's why. Your cortisol levels are going to be raising through the roof because you're nervous, because I'm asking for credit. I'm asking for income. I'm asking for bank statements, which makes you feel vulnerable. And I understand. So bam, helping them get their emotional state down to where they can be back from an emotional response to a logic response and understand it and feel validated is so important to me. And that's part of where you want to interview your loan officer. Some loan officers are wicked good at quick and fast, finger guns and ready to go. And that's great. If that's your personality style, go with that loan officer. I'm a little different. Yes, I'm fast and driver and I'll get things done. But because I've done the emotional intelligence work on myself, I also approach it from a unique perspective, because I know how important I would have loved to have that experience when I was younger versus just kind of having to figure things out on my own. But absolutely. And if you have questions, put them in the comments. Happy to answer and go from there. Just making sure you feel empowered. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of misinformation online about the home market, which I've talked about. Oh, that's cool that you're a loan officer. I used to be a lender. Oh yeah, Alita. See, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm a licensed residential mortgage loan officer. I've been doing it about 10 years. I've helped about 2,000 families with their home investment journey and seen a little bit about everything. And that's what I wanted to share. Like, I've seen in almost everything, and I want to give back to the community and empower people so that they understand what's going on and help take some of the stigma away from home buying. Because there's still people who think you need 20% down, or you need to have like perfect credit, or a ton of money in savings, or a certain amount of time on jobs. That just isn't the case. Now, there are certain parameters for different programs, but that's why you want to talk to a loan officer who can walk you through that. And maybe if you are a year out, they're staying beside you that entire time, making sure that in that year period, you stay on track so that you can achieve your goals of homeownership at the end, instead of just being like, good luck, see you in a year, call me back if you ever, remember me. And that's lazy. But again, some people are transactional, not knocking them, and some people are relational. Some of my clients, it took 3 years to get them in a position to buy, and that's okay. That's why I'm here for the long haul, not just a transaction. And sometimes my clients, especially if they go to a new build, I can't compete with some of the offers that new build lenders can present. And I'll tell them that, like, hey, that builder's lender is giving you a phenomenal deal. Close with them. I'll hit you up on the refi, but go get their money and go. That's okay. That's what I'm here for. If you got questions, put them in the comments. If you own a house, let me know. How long have you owned? Have you checked how much your property's appreciated? If you're a realtor, let me know. What are you seeing? What's your market looking like? If you own a house and you've been getting inundated with requests to refinance and marketing information, let me know. I can walk you through it. What are your concerns and fears? because this is important. Again, just a little bit about me. I'm Ron Toy with the Ron Toy team at Cross Country Mortgage. I'm a licensed residential mortgage loan officer, and I have helped almost 2,000 families along their home investment journey in the last 10 years. It's important. And yes, real estate is such an important investment, and I'm here to help you because this is the thing. There's so many ways to build long-term generational wealth through real estate where you don't have to put a crap ton of money out of pocket. And one thing, if I could go back in time, now I'm 41 and I shared this with my son, and I always bring this perspective because I told him, look at me as if I am a time traveler. I was your age, and now I've lived 21 years more than where you're at right now. My son's 20, I'm 41. And I'm like, if I could go back to your age, which he's in the Air Force and he actually follows instructions, so it's going to be good. The FYP does connect people so awesome. First 2-3 years, I spent just kind of lurking and watching people and growing and learning, and it opened my mind to whole different worlds I never even considered, and it was amazing. But going back to that, so I told my son, think of me as a time traveler. I've lived your life. Doesn't mean I'm smarter. It just means I've had more experiences. And I was like, if I could go back to your age, I'd buy a fourplex, a 4-unit property, live in one side, and rent the other 3. And I'd stay in it for 12 months to 24 months. And then I'd buy another fourplex, but live in one side, rent the other 3 out, stay in it 12 to 24 months, and do it again. Every 12 to 24 months, never putting 20% down. Maybe the first one I do with FHA with down payment and closing cost assistance and get my earnest and option and appraisal money back at closing. Then the next one, maybe I'd go conventional, still use down payment and closing cost assistance up to 5% and do it again on the next one and the next one and the next one. And by the time I where I'm at now, I could have 10 to 20 fourplexes. So we're talking 40 to 80 doors under management. And the passive income from that, I would never have to work again just by doing that slow and steady build. It's important. Let's see. It's wild to me that you want to live in a duplex or something with my son. We both could still make it. That's my thing. Like, imagine if as a single person or whatever, you have the space, kind of like if some people live in apartments or whatever. But I'm thinking of it as more of an investor standpoint. Like, if I'm buying this property to live in it, because you can buy 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom fourplexes that have 4 individual addresses connected to one property. And so, but looking at it from a pure investor standpoint, buying property without having to put a bunch of money down, having a place to live. Because back then I was living in apartments and different level of apartments. I didn't own a house. I was just being an idiot young kid who's making money and, doing my life. But that's what I would do if I go back in time. Fourplex, do it every few years until I retire and be done. But that's part of the conversation is door goals. Or buy a 1-bedroom apartment. Like I showed on my page, there's videos, if you scroll back to like showing people how to buy a $100,000 apartment. That your payment's like $800 depending on the HOA a month. That's cheaper than rent is right now. And at least you're building equity. Yeah, my aunt told me the first buyers programs help a lot. Absolutely. This is important. I'm glad that your aunt was sharing you that. And that's the thing. Almost every state has down payment and closing cost assistance programs. It is phenomenal. And like, I talked about this on my live the other day. I helped a client last month. They closed on their first house. It was like, I can't remember, it's 326 or 356. Somewhere north of 300,000. They got $3,500 back at closing. Because when you use down payment assistance programs and they give more than 4% towards your cash to close, this one was 5%, you're allowed to get back what's called POC costs. That's paid outside of closing. So your earnest, option, and appraisal money. You got that back at closing. So $3,500 in their pocket to start off their life in their home is huge. And that